can tell I've been away for a while. The water evaporated in my cup. That would be great. Would you get me some water? Avion, if they have it. Thank you. So I'm going to do a little travelogue first before we get into the meat of the talk. But as you may or may not know, Dorian and I and our two daughters, Heather and Grace, we were in Paris for a while, a couple of weeks, and then we came back from Paris. We landed in Alexandria, Virginia, and at the airport, which was probably a good idea. And Dorian had her graduation for her doctorate, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah. And then we were back home for a few days, and then we were out up at the conference at Asilomar last week up until last night. So, yeah, it's been quite a time. So this isn't. Oh, you know what? Just click on anything, make that go away. Thank you. There we go. So this is Paris. This is the Musée d'Orsay, and they have. This is like on the 5th level. They have this giant clock that oversees the Seine River. And it's a window, and you can stand inside and look out through the clock. And at the other end, there's another clock that has a restaurant right inside. It's just gorgeous. And on that floor was a special exhibit of the Impressionist paintings. They had 350 Impressionist paintings, Monet and all that. It was just amazing. It's one of the greatest collections of the Impressionists ever assembled in one place. So hop over and see it before it goes away. This is one of the markets where we'd get up in the morning and we'd go out, and there'd be markets in all the different neighborhoods where you could purchase things to eat. We had apartments most of the places we stayed, so we'd get salad fixins and rotisserie chickens and things, and go back and have lunch in the apartment. That's the market in Aix-en-Provence. So there's everything from food to flowers. There's antiques. There's clothes. It's just amazing what you can buy, and it takes up blocks and blocks and blocks of the city. Little seafood, if you like seafood. This is Grace dancing in front of the Moulin Rouge, where she couldn't get in, but she and Heather were out running around the Montmartre on their own. Well, actually, I think Mary and Richard were with them at this point. We met Mary and Richard in Paris, and their grandson Finn. So Grace said, I need a picture of me dancing in front of the Moulin Rouge. So, okay. Now you have to look at this. This is me and the Mona Lisa.
Such culture.
How many of you have a picture of you with the Mona Lisa? Okay, a couple of you do. Great. Yeah, that was about as close as I could get. That's at the Louvre, obviously. So, okay, then we went to Burgundy. This is a picture of a typical meal, seafood and pasta, and then the wine. And we went in there. Burgundy is a wonderful wine region. They had these caves, and this one place we went to. In the city of Beaune, right in the center of the town, when you go downstairs, there's 3 miles of caves that are just full of wine and bottles. And every now and then you come to a barrel like this. This isn't one of them, but you come to a barrel and there'll be a bottle of wine on it for you to taste. And you taste as much as you want, and then you try to get to the next cave. This was at a chateau out in the countryside that we visited. I actually bought some wine there. And then that's the top there is what the vineyards look like. And it's sort of like going to Napa or up to Saint Ynez, except everything's green in Burgundy, the hillsides and everything. It's just gorgeous, just really gorgeous. This is where we stayed in Nice. We had an apartment in this complex. And this is Dorian doing her walk-in for her PhD. And it was really nice, really, very wonderful ceremony. She's in Boston right now at a conference. I'll be flying there this afternoon to see her, and we'll be up there for till Friday. And then let's see what else. Asilomar. Again, our conference there is just a wonderful experience. It's one of the highlights of my year every year. And this year was really amazing. Just everything, the way everything came together. And you were there. Just the music was. It's always great. The music program. They usually have about 15, 20, 25 musicians that come in and out during the week. And this year, every year, I would say the level of musical ability tends to go up. They tend to bring in people with. They brought in this one woman, Tammy Brown, who's a pianist, and from San Francisco. And part of her introduction was she's played at Carnegie Hall, soloed, and she's going to be playing jazz at Lincoln Center this fall. So incredibly accomplished musicians, and she played some stuff that just elevated you right out of the room. Other highlights were Four Stories High, who have been here, Craig Benelli and Laura Berman. They were amazing, and the other couple that have been here, Lisa Ferraro and Erica Lockard, who were here a couple years ago. Lisa was the music director, and they were just amazing. So it was really great. Every experience includes music, and that's really very special. So I want to share this one concept, and this is one I've known before, but it was kind of reiterated at the conference, and I thought it would be a good thing to bring back and share with you. Many of you have heard of Viktor Frankl. He was in the concentration camps during World War II. Just about his entire family were killed, and he survived. And when he came out, he was both a philosopher and a psychologist, among other things. And one of the things he really contributed, there's a wonderful book called Man's Search for Meaning that he wrote after getting out of the camps, because it was really about how did he stay in a state of mind that was positive. He was able to really stay in a positive state of mind because he decided fairly early on, he said, the Nazis could do whatever they wanted to my body, but they couldn't have my mind. So he would, in his mind, conduct symphonies, and he would imagine the entire symphony, and he would sit there, he said, I would surround myself internally with beauty, thinking about works of art and nature and beautiful, beautiful images and things. And that's how he would go through his day, having that in his mind. And he'd sit down to a meal of gruel, and he'd imagine sitting down in the finest restaurant to the finest meal. And he was able to stay in a state of mind that allowed him to continue to move forward with his life and without, falling into despair and bitterness. Well, one of the models he came up with afterward is a psychological model, and it says this. It says that when I stand here, I'm representing this port here that he calls sick. He says 99% of people live in a mental construct, a mental and emotional construct that you could define as sick. And occasionally, they move over here to what he called not sick. But mostly it's back and forth. You're sick, then maybe you're not sick for a while. Or you're sick in one area of your life and not sick in another. But not sick is just that. It's not sick. There is another area that he called thriving that would be way over here. And he said less than 1% of people ever get over to thriving. They tend to spend their entire lives between sick and not sick. Back and forth. Seems like we're getting better, and then it gets worse. We're getting better, but then it gets worse. Hard to sustain that quality. And the journey between sick and not sick is not that far. But the journey between not sick and thriving is a significant distance in terms of the degree of change in your belief system and your attitude that is required to maintain and sustain a thriving lifestyle. It might look like that. Where you're in one of those X's. And so few people seem to make it over to thriving. And it's interesting because quite often when you see someone who's at thriving, if you're over here at sick, not sick, and you meet someone who's thriving, you'll notice that you might tend to resent them. You see this in school where, in certain subcultures in schools where the kids that get good grades are considered outcasts. Or the kids that excel in one area or another, everybody's over here and sick and not sick, they're thinking, well, what's the matter with them? Why aren't they over here suffering with us? Maybe you've been in an environment like that. Maybe you've been in an environment like that in a workplace where someone who comes in and really does the job is resented by those who are trying to, I just want to do my 8 and go home and do as little as possible during that time. So somebody comes in and starts doing a really good job and they're passionate about what they're doing, well, that's going to screw up your system, right? I think I've told the story one time when I was assigned to a district in Metro-Dade I was relatively new to the department, but I'd been a police officer somewhere else for a number of years. And I got on a squad, and I loved my job. I would go out and write lots of tickets. I was making lots of arrests. I'd back everybody up. I didn't want to sit around and do nothing. I mean, if something was going on, I was headed toward it. Sometimes you're in an insane way, because there's a call going out, there's a shooting in progress, and you start going toward it instead of the other way. Occasionally you think about, what am I doing? But, And I remember one time this old timer came over to me on that squad after a few months, and he said, listen, you're making the rest of us look bad. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're not going to get promoted by doing this stuff, so slack off, or you may find you don't have as many backups as you might need. So I guess he was the appointed spokesperson for the rest of the squad. You ever have a moment in life where someone gives you on a silver platter an opportunity to say who you are? So I said, well, thanks. I would prefer if you didn't back me up, because I find when you do get to a scene, you tend to screw it up and make it worse. So that's fine with me if you don't back me up. And if you don't like the way I do my job, too bad. And I was a little nervous as I said that. I'm thinking about ramifications, But I also knew that if I didn't establish who I was, the only other alternative was to join this group over here, who were counting the days to their retirement. They all had calendars, counting the days. Some of them like 7 years to go. They knew how many days. How many days do I have to get through so I can retire? How'd you like to live your life that way? So I told him one time, I was telling him one time, I said, statistics show that the average police officer lives 18 months after he retires. Which is true. It's true. At that time, this was the 80s, the average life expectancy for a police officer was 59. And that's not from getting shot. Hardly anybody gets shot. It was from having a crappy attitude. And it was from totally identifying with the job so that when you left the job, you had no identity. Now, that can happen in any profession, So when I over-identify with the job or the title or the role, I can't be anywhere but sick or not sick. I can't be anywhere but there. If I'm going to be thriving, the only way to thrive is to be who I am, and the job or the role is something I'm doing right now as a way of expressing who I am. But it's not who I am. You get that? Does that make sense? I had a friend on the department. He had been my district commander when I first went to work, and I got to know him. And he went right up. He was major, then he was captain, then he was divisional chief, and then he was assistant director. And he'd been on the department about 38 years. And I said to him one time when I think it was when he made division chief, there were like 5 of them in a 3,000 person department. I said, congratulations, this is fantastic. You must really be happy and you're going to really enjoy this. He says, well, I'll enjoy it today. Tomorrow I start planning for my next promotion. I said, huh? I didn't. Internally, I did, but I said, "Oh, okay, enjoy that." And when I got to talk to him, I said, well, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, I can't." He says, "I'm not the kind of person that can sit here and wallow in something. I've got to be heading for the next thing." And about 6 months later, I found out that the director, who was equivalent to the police chief, had told him, this particular individual, that A, we want you to retire as soon as possible, and B, if you don't retire, you will never get promoted again and your life will be a living hell. It's hard to motivate a civil servant. That's kind of what they tend to try to do. So he didn't know what to do. And he held on for about six months or a year, something like that, and he found a police chief job in some little town in Florida. And he said to me, I saw him as he was on his way out the door, and he said, I gotta be a cop. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't. And taking that job, the next job to go to some little town in Florida, his wife left him. That was okay. I'll still be a cop. You know? That's not thriving. No matter how successful, how far up that ladder you get, you cannot thrive unless you are you doing the thing out of a sense of purpose and passion, and unless you can walk away from it if your inner wisdom tells you to. You know, many of you know Dorianne was a top executive at Countrywide. You know, a much beloved company. Well, when she was there, it was the fastest growing mortgage company in the world. She started there in 1999. They had about something like 17,000 employees, and by 2008, they had 66,000 employees. And she was a chief technology officer for one of their biggest divisions. She had hundreds, probably thousands of people working for her, making big money. And she came home one day and said, I got to get out. And I said, what? She said, my inner voice is telling me the company, the principles of what's happening, my principles are being violated. And she said, I got to get out. And I said, absolutely, I support you. So she said, she gave her notice and everything, gave 6 weeks notice, which you do as an executive, left, sold her stock options, and we went on a vacation, went on a 4,200-mile drive. And in the middle of that, we're driving up near Mount Shasta somewhere, and intermittent radio reception, and the radio thing comes on and it says, Countrywide Chief Executive Angelo Mazzillo is being questioned by Congress as the financial meltdown continues. It all fell apart. Within 72 hours, Countrywide was no more. It was owned by Bank of America. And all the people she worked with that thought she was absolutely crazy for leaving lost millions of dollars in the stock options that they owned, those executives. And then they hired her back for 2 years to oversee the conversion of her systems into Bank of America. But she knew who she was. She could walk away from a high six-figure income and said, I'm done. It's not who I am anymore. It takes courage. I always believed, and I was taught this when I was young, if you can't walk away from your job, you're a slave. If you feel trapped and you say conditions are keeping me from doing what I would choose to do with my life, you might as well be a slave, right? Because you're not a choice. And when you're not a choice, you can't thrive. You're sick or maybe not sick. We need to be a choice in every area of our life, in our relationships, in our work, in our financial awareness or abundance or lack thereof. You can have no money and be a choice, Depends on what you need, what you think you need. So the question becomes, what will it take for me to thrive? And it's not an external thing at all. The external thing is the result of where your consciousness is. So when you think about thriving, you look inside. It's a feeling. It's a knowing. It's an experiential thing. It's just a sense of who you are and that all is well. And that anything that shows up as an obstacle is simply that. It's an obstacle. It's a temporary thing that you're called, something is being called from within you to overcome it. But when I'm sick or not sick, an obstacle is, oh my God, it's impossible. Oh, I can't do anything about that. Oh, I can't leave the relationship. I can't move away to follow my dream because my family would be disappointed. I don't want to hurt anybody else's feelings. Or I'm addicted. Over here is the place of addiction. I'm addicted, might be to substances, you know. There was a study recently done where they would ask audiences, you know, in all different settings, how many people in here have an addiction? And usually about 2 to 3% of the hands would go up in a typical audience. Well, we know this, 20% of the population is addicted to drugs or alcohol. 1 in 5 people are addicted to drugs or alcohol. And that probably represents 1% of the addictions. So the correct response would be every hand goes up, because we're all addicted to something. It may not be a substance. We may be addicted to not having our lives work. We may be addicted to a relationship that doesn't work and hasn't worked for years. Not to say it can't work, it just doesn't, because we're addicted to it not working. If you're addicted to it not working and it starts working, you got a problem. That's the same as the person addicted to booze has when they don't have any booze. If I'm addicted to my relationship not working and it starts working, I've got a big problem to solve. But I probably have a whole arsenal of tools to help me solve it. I'll piss her off somehow. And if I don't, she will, because if I'm in an addictive relationship, so is she. Or he, or whatever. What I've been growing in me and coming to realize is that we got more problems than we think we do. We had a presenter, I'll show the video one night here. We had a presenter named Greg Bear, has a program called Real Love. And it basically says, love, unconditional love, is the only thing that matters. Everything else is bullshit. I think he broke the record for saying bullshit in Merrill Hall at Silomar. At least 100 times during his talk. And he says, most of us are lying, deceiving frauds. Because we don't really love and we don't even know what it is. He said, love is just this. It's wanting the best for someone else, even at the expense of your own immediate happiness. It's not about you, it's about relationship. And if we don't have that in our lives, we create addictions to make up for it. And we stay in this range here of sick, not sick, sick, not sick, sick, not sick. What does it take to thrive? What it takes to thrive is a complete break, in many cases, from the consciousness that we brought into the last moment. You have to, in order to get somewhere where you haven't been, you have to do something you haven't done. Now, the beauty of our teaching is that's what it lays out. It's all about that. Dr. Holmes said that over and over and over and over and over. And if you don't like him, Wayne Dyer said it over and over and over and over and over. And if you don't like him, Marianne Williamson said it over and over and over and over. And if you don't like her, Deepak Chopra says it, and everybody else says it that knows anything. Well, I need to hear it a certain way before I'm really going to get it. How about hearing it from yourself? I made a decision I'm going to thrive more. I thrive in some areas of my life, but not in all. Of late, I haven't been thriving in my ministry for a while. And that has nothing to do with you. It has to do with me. Because I built up a story about my ministry that isn't true. That's what keeps us from thriving. We build up a story about what is and what can be and what can be expected and what has been It has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with stuff we made up so we wouldn't feel some pain we didn't want to feel. Now, I don't know what the hell it's going to look like when I do thrive. I know I'll feel better. You may not like it at all. Not my problem. And what I mean is, you know, you can look at all the stuff. We together, all of us in community, and if you just come in the last month or so, you're exempt from this statement. Over the years, we have created a loving, wonderful, connected community that is not sustainable financially. Now, you can sit down and strategize about what to do and all that, and that's fine. But if I'm not strategizing out of a consciousness of thriving, what's the point? If I'm in struggle, I can create a new strategy that will create additional struggle, or the same amount of struggle with a different face on it. We do that, by the way, when we go from relationship to relationship. Boy, that relationship was awful. I'm going to get a new person who will be better to me, and then you find a new person and you struggle the same way with a new face. Because you haven't changed. You know? You know, when I talk on a regular basis with Mary DiVincenzo, our treasurer, and Mary does a wonderful job of keeping track, and she also does a pretty good job of worrying about it. Which means I don't have to. But no, you know, I don't worry about it. I don't. What's the point? I pay attention to it. I think, what can I do? What can I do differently? But then I say, that's the wrong question. What can I be differently? That's the right question. What can I be differently that the thriving will be around me? And, you know, it's a feeling thing. It's sort of like we have inner gyroscopes. You know, you have one inner gyroscope that kind of tells you where you are in time and space. You know, it knows your body is sitting, and it's like a feedback thing with all your physical self. But there's another gyroscope that says whether your life is on track or not. Whether you're really, really, really being radically honest in your life or not. Whether you're really being the best you at any given moment. And that's an unfailingly accurate gyroscope that we usually learn, because we're stuck in the sick, not sick thing, we usually learn to ignore. Except in those nights where you can't go to sleep. So what we've got to do is pay attention to that. And if it's saying, my life isn't working, don't look for something to do differently. Look for some way to be different. Which is what? It can be as simple as up-leveling your expectations. It can be looking at, what am I addicted to? An addiction means simply anything you're emotionally attached to that you wouldn't want to let go of and that would create fear if you did. And is that good for me? Because you're never addiction-free. But are there addictions I have that are holding me absolutely in place where I never can get over here to thriving because I can't let go of the addiction? I can feel not sick for a while, maybe because I self-medicate to get there. Or I pretend I'm someone I'm not to get by and to get through the day. You know, if you get online, there's a couple of sites. Facebook is one, and Pinterest is another one, where you see these little cards they put up, these e-cards they put up, and they're usually funny if you're in sick, not sick. I should get an award for not beating the crap out of all the MFs I work with this week. I get that. I'm right there with you. We're both screwed up. You know, if you're thriving and you see that, what are you going to feel? You're going to feel sadness for that person. What a sad way to be. And when I'm sick, not sick, the best I can do is be a smartass about it. And if I'm really a good smartass about it, people will pay me to be a smartass about it. But the only people that will watch me be a smartass about it are people that are in sick, not sick. But that's okay. That's 99% of the population. I have a big target audience. But do I want to live there? Is that where I want to live, move, and have my being? Or is there something better for me that I had when I showed up? Thriving is something we already have when we show up. And we're trained out of it. It's not something I have to get. It's something I already have. I have to remember it. To go back before the brainwashing. To go back before nobody loved me. One thing Greg Bear said, he does work with thousands of people, he said, nobody in our culture is loved properly as a child. Nobody. And we hold to the idea that our parents were loving, and it destroys us our whole lives. Because if your parents ever got angry at you, and it was a pattern, they just didn't love you. They couldn't. You can't yell at someone and then say you're sorry and hold them and say you're loving. You're not. So let's just be honest about that. You know, I look back at my childhood, it was pretty good, but I got yelled at a lot. I thought I was ahead of the game because I didn't get hit, like most of the other kids I grew up with. And then I kind of did the same thing to my kids. Maybe I got a little better. But I yelled at them. They were irritating. I let them know they were irritating. And he says, that's all bullshit. Just deal with it. Learn to love from where you are now. Be your own parent going forward, one that never gets angry or upset with you because no matter what you do, you're loved. And try to find someone else in the world that will do that for you too. Only has to be one person. Doesn't even have to be anybody you know now. And be that for someone else. Unconditional love means just that. No conditions. I was taught early in my science of mind career by my teacher said unconditional love is impossible for a human being. And I believed it. And I look back, I learned later that that person that told me was incredibly damaged from their childhood. We all are. So what? The key is not to look back. The key is to start right now and say, okay, from this point forward, it's different. I'm thriving. I'll screw up big time in getting there, but that's okay too. I'm going to step into a bigger version of myself for one reason and one reason alone. I want to experience happiness in my life on an ongoing, daily, increasing basis. Because that's what we came here to do. This life should be play. And don't let anybody tell you different. There's a whole bunch of serious people. You know where they are? They're in the cemetery. There is nothing that's that serious. Except one thing. Love is all there is. And all we need to do is remember that, which may be the most difficult thing you've ever done. Remember it, insist on it, refuse to participate in a group that doesn't know it. Because you are love. And so am I. Thank you. And namaste.